My name is Kirston Greenop. I was born in Johannesburg and I've lived here my entire life. I've never been to China, but I'm starting to work a lot closer with my colleagues from China, and I'm truly honored to have the opportunity to visit China, especially now that my story is becoming closer and closer to the China story. I work at Standard Bank. We focus on the economic development of Africa. But more and more, what we've come to realize is that our relationship with China is very important for the economic development of Africa. I'm the executive head of an area called Regulatory Advocacy and Stakeholder Engagement. The work that we do is to connect ourselves, the bank, and our partners with material stakeholders in our environment. This includes governments and regulators. Some of the more interesting work that we've been involved in is connecting our Chinese colleagues with the South African government, policymakers and regulators. This has been a very interesting experience because the South African and the Chinese legislative and political system is completely different. Hello, I'm Kirston. And unlike my fellow speakers who you're going to hear from today, this is actually my first visit to China. It's my first visit to Asia. I've never been before. But life is full of surprises, and this is one of the surprises that has actually happened to me. I never imagined that China would be part of my life. I didn't think that actually I would get a chance to even visit China, let alone connect through my bank, through my job with China. So the bank that I work with is Standard Bank. We're a South African bank. So how did this journey begin for me? This is my story. About 10 years ago, Standard Bank and the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China met in Cape Town. And this started a partnership. This partnership, through multiple negotiations and eventually signing of documents and agreements, has resulted in a partnership that has connected Standard Bank and Africa to China. Okay. What happened with this connection and this partnership was that the two groups of people needed to come together. And it was absolutely inevitable that some kind of culture shock was going to happen. And what we found is that when these two groups of people came together, there was some discomfort, there were some frustrations. People were worried about how they worked together. So we had a fabulous idea. We were going to have an exchange program. We thought this was great. We were going to give people from ICBC a chance to go and work in Standard Bank in South Africa for 1 to 2 years, and we would take people from Standard Bank South Africa and put them into the offices in ICBC in China, and then we would give them the plane tickets, we'd say good luck, and off they went. But things are not that easy. There were quite a few frustrations. I can tell you about some of the ones that we experienced with some of my ICBC colleagues coming to South Africa. So I'll always remember one of the colleagues I'm quite close to right now, when he came to the bank 2 years ago, I met him for coffee. And he said to me the one thing that stood out for him was that he couldn't get over how much coffee we drank. We were always drinking coffee in the bank. In our bank, we've got 9 floors. There's a coffee shop on every single floor. And he said, why are you always drinking coffee? Because if I have a meeting, I will have it over coffee. If I have to get to meet somebody, I'll do it over coffee. And if I've got a really difficult problem to solve, I need my cup of coffee. And he said, but why are you drinking coffee? Coffee is casual. It's not for serious business. But as time has gone on and we've got to know one another, we speak, we deal with projects together, now what happens is whenever he sets up a meeting with me, it's always over coffee, and he's the one who's buying the coffee. Another example that I can pull out is the kinds of meetings that we have in business. So in South Africa, and especially in my team, some of the meetings that we have can be incredibly loud. We're not a quiet bunch of people. So we get together, we meet, everybody debates an issue, we negotiate, we thrash it out, we want to talk to one another, we'll disagree with you and we'll say, no, you're wrong. And then at the end of the meeting, we'll come to some kind of conclusion. What happens is that probably the next day we have to have another meeting to figure it out again. And my Chinese colleagues were getting quite frustrated with this process. It was loud, it was in your face, and it was long, it was time-consuming. Why not, when the boss gave us something to do, can you not take the thing, go and do your job and get it sorted out? We would take such a long time. And this was a process of getting to know one another. And this was a process of actually coming together to actually communicate with one another, to see how things got done. And so what I would do is our colleagues in China is I would create workshops and dialogues for them to get to know how South Africa works. And these were also quite loud, and these were also quite full of noise, and people liked to have their own opinions. And one of these dialogues, I was very worried because one of my colleagues who just arrived from China, she sat at the back and she was very quiet. And I was very worried I'd offended her in some way, or we'd said something that was improper. And I spoke to her afterwards, and I asked her if everything was all right. And she reassured me that actually, no, it was okay. Things were all right. She just preferred to be quiet at the back of the room. So what we've come to realize between the two groups of people is that as long as you communicate with one another and make sure that you're on the same level, you'll be all right. Just check with one another. So communication is the key. That communication builds trust, and you have to work at it constantly. But the point is to put yourself in a situation where you can have that communication. So as I said at the start of the speech, life is full of surprises. One of the surprises has been what a brilliant relationship I've actually formed with my colleagues from China. Has it been an easy journey? Not always. Both sides have made mistakes, but growing pains are part of the process. You have to get to know one another. But I can tell you right now that the rewards by far outweighed any challenges that we have ever experienced. Thank you.